Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Covenant. In this game you take on the role of dwarves looking to reclaim your ancestral home of, well, the dwarves. The mountain has become home to creatures defiling your ancestral home, the buildings have fallen to disrepair, and it's your job, of course, to return to the mountain, cast out the creatures, and rebuild your home to its former glory. Now, each player has 4 basic actions they can take at the starting of the game, and 4, let's say, lowly trained dwarves. Each round you're going to be assigning your dwarf to the different action spots, and the strength of the action you're going to be able to take is going to be the experience of the dwarf, which of course can be supplemented with some beer for a temporary boost. You can acquire more action spots during the game, but they're going to be kind of variations of the same basic type of action you started with. You'll also be able to train up your dwarves to make the actions you take stronger, but you're never going to get more than 4 dwarves, but of course they will get better. The game is played over 3 eras, so you'll only be taking 12 actions, kind of main actions in total during the game, which never seems like enough to clear out the monsters, forge new tool action spots, build houses, and carve new gates that you can place in your new halls. So the main reason I wanted to get this game was because of the designer, Herman Milan. He's become one of my favorite, as he's done an awful lot of my favorite games. Not everything he does I have loved, but some of them have landed on my top 100 games, so I had high hopes coming into this one. Although you get very few main actions, the game is all about chaining, tracks to get bonuses, and long-term planning with tool scoring at the end. So, will this game be worth the blood, sweat, and beers? Or should it just be left for someone else to do at a later date? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and I'll come back to my final thoughts on Covenant. Here's Covenant set up. Each player has a player board and their appropriate pieces. Some of the wooden pieces go into the corresponding spaces on your action area, along with the 2 extra key tokens. 2 houses and 2 folders go into your build area. The other 3 pillars and 3 gates go onto the board in their appropriate spots. The minecarts are just left in your personal supply. You start with 10 markers. 3 of them go on the stat tracks on the main board, and 1 of them goes on the 5 spot of the victory point track. Each player also drafts 2 starting objectives, 1 tradition, and 1 starting resource tile. Take all the resources, track movement, or beer from your resource tile that you just drafted. Any resources collected from your card or during the game must be placed in your storage area, which starts partially covered. Each player also starts with 4 level 1 dwarves in their tavern along with any beer that they got from their resource card. On the main board, their tradition tiles are shuffled and the row filled. The era marker starts on the beginning of the era track. A level 1, 2, and 3 project are randomly selected for the era track. The rebel tiles are shuffled and fill up its row. The 3 enemy dice are rolled and placed on their appropriate spots. The hall tiles are mixed face down and placed into the hall section. The 4 left are flipped over. Anytime you flip over a hall tile, including the setup, fill it with monsters from the bag so that it has the number of skulls of monsters on it. For the relic tiles, king coins, tool tiles, shuffle each stack and reveal 4 for their area. For the inlays, shuffle the gold and silver separately and flip over 3 of each for their respective rows. All resources and beer are placed in the general supply. The game is played over 3 eras. At the end of each era, scoring will happen for the current project and any previous project. This means that the top project will score 3 times during the game. At the end of the game, there will be additional scoring for other items, and you may lose points if monsters get out of hand in the halls. There will be 4 actions you'll be taking during the game with your 4 dwarves. Each action spot can only be activated once per round, but you can get additional action spots. You'll never have more than 4 workers during the game, but they can be upgraded. When you take an action, it will depend on the strength of the worker you just placed, and if there is a beer token spent with it. Beer gives the worker a temporary boost in strength. Now the 4 main actions are Pick, which allows you to dig up the halls and open up more areas, the Axe, which will allow you to capture monsters in the hall, the Compass, which will allow you to build your buildings in the hall, and the Cart, which will allow you to transport the resources you've collected to unlock your gates and pillars to be built later on. There is also a Book action tile, which could be built later on in the game, which is a wild action, and you can choose any of those 4 actions. Now on a player's turn, they will place 1 of their workers on an empty action spot on their player board. They can optionally spend a single beer token to increase that dwarf's strength. If there is an inlay on that action, I'll talk more about inlays in a minute, the player can take 2 actions, the inlay action and the main action, in either order. The main action of the spot will depend on the strength of your dwarf. If you have a relic, you can activate the relic during your turn, either before you assign a worker to any action spot or after you've completed all the actions on your turn. So it's either going to be the very first or the very last thing you do on your turn is to activate a relic. Let's go through the main actions. The dig action allows you to remove rubble. Here you spend the strength of your assigned worker to remove rubble. The cost is printed below each rubble tile. once you've decided which rebel you want, remove the tiles from the board and take the resources and store them in your board. Of course, remembering the limit of your storage. Then, depending on the number of rebel tiles you removed, you'll move up on the mining track, either 1, 2, or 3 spaces. You'll then turn over a single hull tile that is connected to an already flipped over hull. You receive the bonus on that tile you flip it over, and place any monsters in the bag as shown by the number of skulls. Now would probably be a good point to pause and explain a bit about the bonuses, as they are one of the key points of this game. Many times, while you go up tracks, you'll receive bonuses, and I'll explain them all briefly when I talk about the corresponding actions. For example, in the mining action, when you reach or pass one of these lines on the track, you'll receive one of the relics from where you are or above. Now in the main hall, when you flip over the tiles, you're going to be getting various bonuses. You'll be able to move up tracks, make a delivery to the throne room, which I'll come back to during the delivery action. Strengthen the worker by 1. If this means you go from a 2 to a 3, replace the worker from one of your supply for the 3 side. You can capture a monster that's shown. And the last 3 are a little more complex. First is get an inlay. Choose one of the inlays from the board and pay the resources and place it on an empty inlay spot on one of your actions, and it must match the metal type. So a gold has to go on gold and silver on silver. You'll also receive points depending on which metal you bought. The King's Coin means you can buy one of the face-up King's Coins. This will be income during the end of the era. Pay the victory points and place it in an open spot at the top of your board and receive that bonus immediately. You don't get the points income immediately, just the spot where you placed it, that bonus. The last bonus is the Forge a Tool action. Purchase one of the tools from the bottom left of the board. Pay the cost of the tool, plus the cost of the spot that it's in. Place the tool on an empty spot on your player board and receive the bonus for covering it. Any unlocked buildings go to your building area, keys go to your cells, you can push monsters, unlock more storage, etc. for these bonuses. So let's go back to the actions. The skirmish action allows you to capture monsters from the board and place them in your jail. The chart here shows you how much strength each one requires to capture. Take them off the board and add them to your jail cell. Receive the rewards for the monsters removed, which involves moving up the prestige track. You get this reward for each monster you capture, except goblins, which require 2 or more to be captured before you can receive that reward. You also get the reward from the appropriate die, but for this, it doesn't matter how many of those you've captured as long as you've done 1, you only get this bonus once. Once the skirmish is over, roll all the dice that you received a bonus for. Now for the prestige track, the bonuses are strengthening workers and receiving a new tradition scroll. Pick one of the scrolls, pay the cost and victory points, and add it to your player board, and it will usually give you an ongoing ability or end of game scoring, etc. The next action is the transport action. Here you're trading in resources to restore gates and pillars to be placed in the halls with another action. The strength of your worker will dictate how many resources you can transport to a single site. Decide which site you want it to deliver to, and return the appropriate available resources and place your carts on the empty matching spots. For each resource delivered, you receive points. You cannot deliver more to a site than the number beside the site, and once you've delivered the maximum, 1, 2, or 3, you receive the matching piece and place one of your markers on the leftmost slot of the site and receive the reward, which is going to be moving up the court track. The court track bonuses are getting more King's Coins, and like the Hall bonus, you pay victory points to take a coin and add it to the slot and receive the slot bonus. Now, it is possible to overpay to deliver to a site. If you have a strength of 3, for example, and you deliver to a site that has a maximum of 2, that extra delivery can be placed in the throne room following the same rules. This is only one of 2 ways to make a delivery to the throne room. The other is through the Hall bonus here. At the end of the game, the player with the most carts in the throne room will receive victory points. The last action to talk about is the build action. Here you're going to be spending your worker strength to build buildings from your build area. Houses and workshops are placed on a tile itself. Each tile will have a number of diamonds on it that reflects the maximum number of buildings that can be on it. Gates are built between 2 tiles, and this does not count towards the diamond limit for that tile, but there can only ever be 1 gate per tile. So if I build here, there cannot be another gate anywhere around these 2 tiles. The pillar goes at the intersection of 3 tiles, and must be 1 tile side away from any other pillar. Pillars also do not count towards the diamond limit of a tile. Now remember, when you build anything, all tiles that it is on or touches must be on the revealed side up. Whenever you build something, you're going to get a reward for building it as outlined in the player aid. Resources, forging a new tool, getting an inlay, getting points, or moving up tracks. So those are the 4 main actions. Any forged tools will just duplicate these actions. When all players have done their 4 actions, we go through the council phase. Return all of your dwarves from their action spots back to the tavern. In turn order, each player receives their income from the King's Coins that they have. This time, you do not get the slot bonus, but just what is printed on the coin itself. Players then check their jail cell limit. The number of keys you have is the number of monsters you can keep. Any excess monsters are just returned to the bag. You then receive 1 point for each monster you have left, remembering that 2 goblins kind of equals 1 monster. Then all players evaluate the current projectile to receive points, and any previous projectiles. Then you start the next round. At the end of the final era, you move into the final scoring. First, you see how many objectives you can score. If you have passed less than 4 stars total on all 3 tracks, you cannot score any objectives. 4 to 7 stars means you can do one of your objectives, and 8 or more means you can score both of your objectives. And if you have more than 8 stars total, you'll also receive a bonus. Next, you're going to lose 2 points for every hall where you have presence and there is a monster in that tile. Houses and workshops are just the tile that they're on, but remember, for gates and pillars, they have presence in either 2 or 3 tiles respectively. We then evaluate your forged tools. Each column in your tool area corresponds to a different scoring. The number of tools you have forged in that column is a multiplier. If you've not forged any tools, you will not score anything for that column. The relic scoring is the number of unique relics you have multiplied by the number of forged tools you have in that column. Monster scoring is for each monster in your jail at the end of the game. Multiply that by the number of forged tools in that column. Monument construction scores points for the pillars and gates that you have built. This includes the ones you've placed in the main hall and the ones still on your board. Multiply that number by the number of forged tools you have in that column. The district scoring is scoring points for each district that you have presence. And a district is a set of connected hall tiles that all have the same color. For each district you have presence, score the number of points as forged tools in that column. Finally, score 1 point for every 3 combined leftover resources and beer tokens you have. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Covenant. Let's start with the theme and components. I actually think the theme for a straight-up Euro game works really well in this game. The actions you're taking make perfect sense in the theme, and they do exactly what you expect them to do. You dig for more resources, you skirmish to capture monsters, build and transport to make deliveries. It makes the teach and play a little easier because you know what you need, and it's obvious which actions you need to take to get to it. So, I'm impressed with the fun theme. For the components, there is some good and some bad for this one. The look overall is good. I like the look of the board and the pieces. The art and everything is very nice, but I do have some issues with the usability. First, for example, is the placement of the tracks and the associated actions. I really wish the dig action was along the right side of the board, or at least under the skirmish action, since the dig moves you up the mining track, not the prestige track, which is where it's right under. And speaking of tracks, the mining track where you get the relics is not obvious when you get those relics. The other tracks have kind of little icons on the track that clearly show you when you receive that award. I was also not a big fan of how crowded the hull tiles become. There's a bunch of information that is important on them. You know, how many monsters are there going to be spawned? How many houses and forges can be placed on them? And often for the project scoring, you need to know the hull colors or maybe the mineral veins, which quickly got covered up with all the things on them. I do appreciate that each player gets a player aid, which you really need in your first few games. So from a 30,000 foot level, I like the look of the game, but the closer you get, the more the little things you start to notice that maybe were overlooked during the production. On to the gameplay then. This really is an efficiency puzzle to the game. There's not a lot of actions you'll be taking during the game, so making sure you're maximizing each one is really important. But I found the game does a reasonably good job of kind of guiding you on what to focus on. The initial objectives that you draft will kind of dictate areas you may want to focus on, and those will guide you along kind of a loose path. Also, when you start to get more tools, you're going to be further refining your strategy. But there are so many options for you to choose from, and the sooner you decide, kind of the better you'll do. I also really like the choices you have to make during the round. You know, from simple things like, are you going to be spending a beer to increase the strength by 1? And speaking of beer, when you get a second beer, it's at that time you decide if you want to basically spend it to get a double beer token or keep them as 2 singles. You can't do it afterwards. You have to make the decision when you get that beer. So little things like that. Or when you forge more tools. What's more important? The immediate bonus you get or the long-term points from the column you place it in. And is it better to spread your tools out and get some points everywhere and make sure you have 2 tools in the scoring column that you're really going to focus on? I like also that each player board is different. The tool areas have the same unlocks and the endgame scoring, but they're kind of in different columns. It seems that every decision I'm making seems impactful, but the turns themselves are not overly long, but it does mean that people spend a fair amount of time on their turn deciding what they're going to do and in what order they need to do things. With the game being fairly tight, careful planning is required. So actions are quick, turns are long, if you kind of get that. Now, the game is not as wide open as I kind of made it out to be. You'll end up doing a little bit of everything during the game, but you may just kind of slightly slant your strategy one way or the other. You're going to be going up tracks to get those stars to score your objectives. And since each track is tied to an action, you end up doing a little bit of here and a little bit of there. Maybe just a little more here and a little less there. The game turns into a lot more tactical than strategic after the initial round. By then you've kind of decided how to approach your objectives and have hopefully received your first tool for that initial scoring. It then turns into how do I maximize my points for my predetermined goals on this turn based on what the board state is. This is something I really enjoy. I have a plan, but how do I implement it based on what's currently on the board and the situation I'm in? The randomness in this game is right on the border for me. I think if there are any more, it kind of put me off the game. And I must admit, I usually preferred less randomness in games. From the flip of the hull tiles, to the resources being available during the dig action, to the die rolls for the skirmishes. That's kind of really at my upper limit of how much randomness I like in the game. So would I recommend this game? I certainly would. If you're a fan of thinky Euros, this is definitely one to check out. I really like the theme and the overall design of the game. I like the flow of the actions, and they make logical sense in terms of what you need to do. I want to unlock my gate, so I need to transport goods, which means I need the resources from the dig action. I also really enjoy the combo aspect of the game. Going up tracks unlocks some upgrades, which can unlock other upgrades or bonuses. Having inlays gives you more actions or kind of bonuses on your turn, and getting those King's coins is fun to get the income every round. Just so many combos to be looking for. I like that the game gives you kind of a nice little push in the direction you should go, but you don't have to do that. Maybe concentrating more on the tool scoring and ignore maybe one of your objectives. That's a viable option. The game does feel like it's several pieces put together, but I feel that the overall it really comes together as a cohesive whole. Now, I do wish a little more detail was taken on the board and the graphic design for this, and I feel that the rulebook maybe it's unclear, but it's a little difficult to find things that you need to know. I'm also not sure whether the balance of the starting tiles is 100%. Some of them just seem to be a larger starting boost than others, which to be fair is good that they are drafted at the beginning of the game. I also feel that the randomness is just a tiny bit too high for my comfort, and getting bonuses at a time when it's neither no tools you need or maybe traditions that aren't useful can feel a little underwhelming. Overall though, I am going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10 in the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. I was excited to get this one to the table, and it didn't disappoint. It may not be my favorite game from this designer, but it's up there with some of his best. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.